Coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers, we're joined by Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker to discuss how the Indiana General Assembly is doing in the home stretch. WNIN's Lawmakers starts right now. Welcome to WNIN Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson, news manager and local host of WNIN FM's Morning Edition. Before we check in with Senator Becker, here's a report from Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith on what happened in the General Assembly this past week.
The Senate GOP budget diverges sharply from the House version over school vouchers. House Republicans want to dramatically expand the program. The Senate proposes maintaining the status quo. There's still also an open question of how the new budget will fund public and mental health care, whether through standard general fund dollars, a cigarette tax increase or cell phone fee, or some combination thereof. Changes to the Don't Say Gay bill mean a school must notify a parent but not seek consent when a child requests a change to their name or pronouns. The Senate also removed language that allowed teachers to use their religion as reason to refuse to call a student their preferred name or pronouns. And for the first time in decades, the state is set to increase the income limits for people to access the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF, program. Legislation awaiting the governor's signature also raises the program's monthly cash payments. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
We're joined now by Indiana State Senator Vanita Becker, who represents all of Warwick County and eastern portions of Vanderburgh County. Thanks for being here, as always.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Senator Becker. Well, let's talk a little bit about what Brandon mentioned there. Senate Republicans unveiled their budget proposal this past week. What are some of the highlights as you see it?
Well, there is a surplus, but I tell you what, 90% of our children go to public schools. Mm-hmm. And right now in the House version, Vanderburgh County loses a tremendous amount of money. They wouldn't ever be able to give a pay raise to their teachers in this fiscal year. The Senate version looks much better, and the House also wants to raise income levels to $225,000 or $220,000 for someone to get a voucher
right.
to send their kids to a private school. And I think if you make $220,000, you can afford to send your child to a private school on your own. Mm-hmm. Especially in light of the fact, as I said, 90% of our children do go to public schools.
Right.
So that will be a bone of contention between the House and the Senate version. One positive thing that's in the budget bill for the Senate as well, it increases funding for public schools. It also has the funding for the Imagination Library that it was a bill I carried, Senate Bill 340, which funds the Dolly Parton Imagination Library.
Right.
And I'm very pleased with the fact that Senator Mishler put that in. And there's also a little more accountability for charter schools as well, and I think that's important. You know, we have a great high school here that's a charter school.
Right.
But they do not provide transportation and they do not provide lunches. And so if you're a poor kid who needs transportation and lunch, you're not going to go there. You're not going to be able to go there.
Right.
So it's the other thing I hope that the House will stick to, a positive thing, is I think we need to fund the teacher's 13th check, the retirement, and also fund retirement benefits for public employees. They haven't had a decent raise. They didn't get it last year, and I think that's reasonable. Plus, they have a fund that's already supplemented that it wouldn't come out of the general fund.
Yeah.
So, but the Senate did not want to fund that. The House does want to fund it. So, we'll just have to see. There's lots of things in the budget bill that are very positive.
Right.
And I'm pleased with some of those items. Very pleased, as I said.
Let's talk about education a little bit more. You mentioned the House bill Is that the one that would essentially require school districts to come up with the money for teacher increases?
Yeah. Well, and also it's the textbook. You know,
And textbook fees?
textbook fees. The governor said he put a line item in the bill that in his budget for textbooks. The House took that out. They just rolled it into the formula. But unfortunately, when you're getting like 2% for the first year and minus 1% in the second year, that doesn't give you any money. If you have to take out of your budget for textbooks, that's not good either. So the Senate has put a line item in the budget for textbooks so that schools can actually automatically receive that funding for textbooks.
And we mentioned the school voucher difference there. So how will these things, or will these things be settled? What is the next step in the process?
The next step, we heard our first information on the budget yesterday, and we will, next Monday is the last day for amendments to Senate bills or to House bills, actually, that are over in the Senate, as well as our budget bill. So we will pass our budget bill on Tuesday, and that's the deadline for all House versions coming from the Senate, plus our budget bill. And then it will go to conference committee.
Right.
And we only have about a week and a half to do conference committee. We will get on the 19th, right after the last day for thirds, we will hear a new revenue forecast for the state of Indiana.
So that's still to come as the session is still in session. Yeah.
Still in session, and we will see then some items. I have a bill on to help local AAAs on dementia care. We do not have a dementia care program in the state of Indiana. This would not cost a lot of money. And right now, Medicaid pays about $1 billion a year in Medicaid for dementia care. And so I'm hoping we can get $3 million, $1.5 million each year for that program. But we don't know yet. We'll have to see. I'm optimistic. I think we will see revenue increase. I don't expect it to be lower. I expect it to be higher.
Is that right?
And that's still going to leave Indiana with a huge cushion.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course there's always been a lot of talk about that surplus. I mean, does it need to be as big as it is? I mean, in your point of view, what would you consider a safe cushion? And maybe would you dip into that for some things, perhaps
I would.
Education or mental health?
I would. Mental health is important, and there was a hearing in the House Ways and Means this last week, earlier this week, and the House wants to increase the cigarette tax and maybe even alcohol taxes, but they are definitely on board. Several of the most conservative members in the House want to increase the cigarette tax to pay for mental health, and also the public health initiative that will provide local communities, local boards of health with additional funding.
Right.
So we'll just have to see. Right now, there's not a lot of money in the mental health bill. I think there's between 75 and 150 for the public health initiative. Right now, we are below the national average when it comes to public health, and this would just allow local communities to vie for state dollars if they want to. They don't have to. They don't have to be a part of this, but if they choose to, they can apply for funding through the State Board of Health.
Of course, some measures that are getting lots of attention, House Bill 1608, essentially Indiana's version of Florida's Don't Say Gay law, passed the full Senate. It's headed back to the House because it is different than the bill they passed. You voted against this measure. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, I just think it's detrimental to children, and really and truly what the bill says is that you're not going to teach kids sex education from kindergarten through the third grade. We don't do that anyway. Right. Nowhere in our school curriculum do we teach sex education in at that time frame.
I guess some might argue that needs to be put into print so it'll never happen.
It's already in the law.
Okay.
It's already in the law, and I think this is just another way. I guess I'm not there to beat up on kids regardless of their affiliation, and I just don't think that this is particularly helpful to school children.
Another bill along those lines, Senate Bill 480, prohibits physicians from providing or aiding in the treatment of transgender youths. The governor signed that bill into law last week. You voted against that one as well. Can you tell us why?
I did. I serve on the Public Health Committee and listened to thorough testimony. All of the medical groups, like the Indiana State Medical Association, the Indiana Pediatric Society, all of the healthcare groups were opposed to that bill. And my feeling is we should leave healthcare decisions between a doctor and parents and their child. And the state should not be taking over that. And that's really why I voted no.
Back to education. Obviously, Indiana, like a lot of places, is dealing with a teacher shortage. Some of the laws that have been passed, arguably could make it harder to recruit and
I think they
retain
will.
teachers. Yeah. Senate Bill 486 would limit collective bargaining. The Don't Say Gay law, which we just talked about, potentially, banning some books from classrooms. I think you have voted against most of these measures.
Yes.
So what do you think the state should be doing to recruit and retain teachers?
Well, we shouldn't be making it harder, and we shouldn't be eliminating collective bargaining. Earlier they had a bill in House, the same bill. It started off where it ended discussions of working conditions. And I think if you work in a place, you ought to be able to discuss your working conditions. I mean, even we do at the legislature. We ended up having to give our legislative assistants a huge pay raise because they hadn't been paid adequately for a number of years. I mean, they finally realized they were losing staff and they couldn't keep them. I lost my legislative assistant just before this session started, and she took a job that paid her twice as much. So I think we should be doing things to help teachers and not to ridicule or take away their ability to discuss working conditions or to collectively bargain. I think those are good things. And the majority of the public supports those things. And so I think it's detrimental. We should be providing better pay and better working conditions and support for teachers. They have a tough job. They really do. And so I think all of these measures, including banning books, I would have voted for the bill that banned certain books if it hadn't made felons out of librarians. But I'm not going to vote for a bill that makes felons out of teachers just over books. I mean, you can already go to the school board. I suspect there's not a book in Vanderbilt County that hasn't been taken off the shelf or put behind the shelf if parents have a concern. Right. It's very easy to go to the local school board, the superintendent, your principals. There's a process. And I did hear that they might bring that back without the felony conviction and just so that there's a process. And I don't have a problem with that.
You would support that?
I would support that. I just don't want to make teachers into felons over a book that somebody doesn't like.
Yeah. Another bill that's gotten a lot of attention, House Bill 1334, it would add ID requirements to mail-in voting, mail-in ballot applications. It is headed to the governor's desk. This was another measure that you opposed. What were your issues with that one?
Well, my issues with that one is I think it's just going to make it harder for the elderly and the disabled to vote. And we have not had a problem with voting, with voter fraud in Indiana. And so I didn't really see the significance of this piece of legislation. To require someone to get a photo ID, it's okay to use a photo ID, but then they want to add their social security number, the last 4 digits, or their driver's license number, and they already have to prove by filling out a ballot that they want to vote absentee, and I think that's sufficient enough.
Well, as we mentioned, several examples here of bills supported by at least a majority of Republicans that you've voted against. Do you have any concerns that the GOP has maybe sort of veered away from being the party of small government and perhaps are restricting people more and more
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's my concern. This is not the Republican Party that I started with. And I haven't changed, but an awful lot of people I talk to do not understand why Republicans, we are the party of less government but in all these measures we're asking government to do more and to interfere in people's most personal lives, and I just do not support that.
Yeah, and I guess and dictating more about what local government is doing.
And also taking away local government's ability to make decisions for themselves. We should not be doing that.
Well, let's get back to mental health. I know that's an issue that's near and dear to you. Both chambers are moving forward with mental health bills, Senate Bill 1, House Bill 1006. What are your thoughts on what's been passed so far?
Well, so far, as I said, Senate Bill 1 was before the Ways and Means Committee earlier this session, well, actually earlier this week, and they want to raise cigarette taxes.
Right.
To fund that. I don't think there's an appetite in the Senate to do that.
So what would you rather see? What do you think?
Well,
would
we
be
have
more
we have a
reasonable?
huge surplus, and
Yeah.
right now it's like 13%. That's one of the highest surpluses we've ever had. I think we need to have a surplus. We need to have a rainy day fund, but we also need, when we have the funding available, we have not done a good job on mental health, and especially after COVID, we have more children and more adults that are suffering from mental health issues. And we need to, I've been a mental health advocate since I started, and they have not done the job. The state has not done the job in the past, and so I'm pleased and excited to see us finally move in the right direction. You know, I don't think we need to raise the cigarette tax. If that's something they want to consider, I'll certainly look at that.
Right.
But I just think we need to fund those issues.
And something that could be funded out of the surplus, as you
And
said.
it could also be funded out of the surplus.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to Senate Bill 265. It'll expand eligibility for temporary assistance for needy families for the first time in 3 decades. That's an expansion. It's passed the House and the Senate. It's on the governor's desk. Most legislators voted for it. Did you feel that there was a need for it?
Oh, definitely. Senator John Ford, and I've tried those bills in the past to try to get them to raise it. I mean, it's temporary assistance for needy families, and it is not a large amount of money. I mean, about $177 a month. And this only extends it for 6 months if someone is pregnant. So it's, I think it's long overdue.
Yeah. Let's talk about another bill that I know has gotten some attention, House Bill 1009. It expands a father's financial responsibility in pre and post childbirth costs. It passed the House and Senate almost unanimously. It also has moved on to the governor's desk, obviously. So why do you think that was an important measure?
I think it's important because I think that when someone gets pregnant, it takes two to tango, so to speak.
Right.
So I think we should be putting more responsibility on the man as well. Up to now, it's always just fallen upon the woman. And I don't think that that's right. And it may teach men to be a little more responsible in what they do.
Well, let's move on to another topic that always seems to be with us, and that is gun violence. In the light of some recent shootings, what are your thoughts on Indianapolis hosting the big NRA convention this week? I understand former President Trump, former Vice President and Indiana Governor Mike Pence are among the scheduled speakers. You have any thoughts or feelings on that?
Not really. I think it's certainly their choice. I think it was probably, and I know this was scheduled a long time ago.
Right.
But it was a little disheartening or concerning because you don't know how, especially after the shooting in Louisville.
Right.
And I found out that one of the women that was killed, that died that day, had worked here at Liberty Federal Credit Union. She had moved to Louisville to help her daughter take care of her children, this position opened up at Old National there, and
Right.
she took it, and she's now dead. And that's a real tragedy. I think we need better background checks. I don't think we needed to do the concealed carry bill that we did last year. All of law enforcement was opposed to it with good reasons, because now you can carry a gun without a permit.
Right.
And I don't think that that's good.
And what about an issue that often comes up, because so often it's involved in these shootings, and that is the assault-style rifles. Do you think that they should be banned, or there should be some sort of special requirements to obtain one?
Well, I think they need to be educated on them, and I do think that if people are going to have them in their homes, that they should be locked up away from children. But I think it's something we should look at.
Yeah. I mean, there was a national ban in effect that was.
There was a
overturned
national
years
ban
ago.
at one time, and it expired, and we didn't renew it.
I see. But you'd be willing to look at that idea?
I would certainly be willing to discuss it.
Yeah. Well, as we come down the home stretch of the General Assembly session, the budget session, any other bills or measures that you're
Yes.
Keeping an eye out for, or perhaps
Well,
that you're hoping
I'm
for?
happy to say
developments?
that I carried Senate Bill 473, which, because you are a taxpayer in Vanderbilt County, we had a bill that helped with our new sewage treatment plant that actually saved the city and Vanderbilt County taxpayers $40 million. Had to work with IDEM on that issue, and we have passed that. It's now gone to the governor. And we actually put an emergency clause on it toward the end, and I'm very pleased to see that happen, because our sewer bills are too high now.
Right. That, as I understand it, changes some mercury requirements.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you can take the water out of the Ohio, and there are very few cities along the Ohio that actually use this method. But we don't have wells that we could dig. They tried to. They found no water in wells in Vanderbilt County where it would help with the water and the sewage treatment. So this is very positive for taxpayers in Vanderbilt County.
What else do you see coming down the pike here in the closing days? What do you hope to see?
Well, we just passed House Bill 1368, which actually, I'm sorry, it's 1568.
1568.
Which is contraceptives for women, and it will allow pharmacists who choose to take the training, because they do have extra training, and then they will be able to prescribe birth control pills for women 18 and older. I think that's very positive, especially in light of the abortion ban in Indiana that was passed last summer.
Right.
This actually provides access. If you're against abortions, you ought to be for contraceptives. And this passed 29-20 in the Senate just this week.
So it was a pretty close vote.
Yeah, it
Does
wasn't.
that tell us a little bit about the
Well,
feelings of the General
there
Assembly?
were some people who are against it for religious reasons. I can tell you that I know a lot of Catholics who support birth control. They are Catholic, but they don't necessarily agree with everything that the church dictates.
Right.
And this is one where they disagree with the church. I know many Catholic women who take birth control, or did when they were younger. So, plus the dynamics, if you followed the Wisconsin election of the judge up there,
Right.
and also the state of Kansas that passed the ban, that actually eliminated a ban on abortions last summer. And Kentucky also, during the last election, eliminated a ban on abortion as well.
So you're seeing some movement in that
We're
direction?
seeing
you
a
think?
lot of movement, and I think that will be a very difficult issue for Republicans in the next election for president.
All right, we will have to leave it there. State Senator Vanita Becker, thank you so much for joining us, as
Thank you.
always. And we hope we will tell you that we'll be off next week for the WNIN auction. We'll be back the following week when our scheduled guest is Indiana State Senator Mark Messmer. I'm John Gibson of WNIN FM. Thanks for watching WNIN Lawmakers.